Welcome back to part two of my chat with Sean Turnell, happy-go-lucky economist who's found himself in a difficult situation. Sean, in part one, you were telling us about your relationship with the country Myanmar and how after the military uprising that you were arrested on suspicion of espionage and spying, and that you were kept in custody in a room that you've described as a storage shed / like a box, or you refer to it as a box. You're in there for a couple of months and then something happened.
Yeah, the something happened was that the legal process began, so they formally acknowledge now that they had me. So they were actually sort of playing all sorts of games with the Australian government and so on as to where it was and all that. So they sort of acknowledge now that I'm in custody and begin a legal process. Like when I say legal, of course, in inverted commas. And I'm taken then to the prison, to the big main prison of Yangon.
Yeah, okay. And this is the prison referred to as Insein prison.
Absolutely. You couldn't get a better named prison. Also one in which pretty much describes what it was all about.
So going from the environment you were in, which is intimidating and scary enough to start with, but then going into a prison, that throws up a whole lot of other fears. Now, you don't strike me as the most physical guy, allegedly, because you could be a spy, we're not sure. Surviving in prison is tough. And, your first impressions walking into, and that I think that's everyone's, and I've sat here with a lot of tough people, but everyone acknowledges the fear of walking into a big prison.
Just unmitigated horror, Gary. And the prison itself, so it's over 100 years old, an old British Empire sort of prison. It looked like a medieval dungeon, a medieval castle, a huge gatehouse.
Foreboding.
Totally foreboding, just looking down at you, with a giant wooden door, so big that they'd never actually opened that door. Yeah. There was a little door within the door, just like there is in Hollywood movies.
It's for effect, basically.
And being pushed through this little door, and of course by this time I've got handcuffs on and so on, other prisoners all around me, but the whole place looked medieval. Just completely horrifying. And I'm sort of telling myself this is a terrible moment, but you just got to get through it. I remember humming the theme of the old 1969 movie, The Battle of Britain, trying to summon up my courage and thinking, that these young guys would take off in Spitfires and, and their lives are on the line. You just got to summon that up, because being my age, I grew up on a diet of all those sort of old World War II movies and all that. So I'm just summoning up
Britain,
this.
A bridge too far.
But in trying to, deal with things, nothing to do with sort of modern theories of psychology or self-help, none of that. It's all the old stuff, stiff upper lip and just trying to get through.
Well, like, what was it, Bridge Over the River Choir, where they're whistling as they're marching into the camp. There's a quote from your book that I just want to read out because we're talking about, and this is arriving at this place. So this is in your words. I was arriving at this dreadful place, me, a 57-year-old professor of economics from Sydney, Australia, who had never received a traffic ticket, a person who had just about his whole life spent in the halls of academy, a person whose idea of an uncomfortable confrontation was telling a student their essay was not really that good. I laughed aloud when I was reading that because that's who you are in your mind, and you're about to walk into one of the most notorious prisons in Asia.
Absolutely, mate. I used to worry about, telling a student, oh, look, you almost did it, but just wasn't quite there, and I'd always look for consoling words and so on. I just avoided confrontation.
But it shows a lot of promise.
Yeah, exactly.
So, going in there. So I would imagine, and I'd just say what I would be fearing. Okay, I'm going in there. Am I putting with general population? Who else is in prison? It's not just the guards that I've got to worry about now. It's the other people I'm going to be associating with. Talk us through the experience from when you went in there.
Yeah, totally. So, I have no real-world exposure to prisons at all. So I've only got movies and books and things like that. So, all of those fears are there.
Did you watch The Great Escape?
Oh, sure did.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
yes.
Was that going through your mind? If I could
Totally
just
it was.
dig a tunnel?
Totally it was. In fact, even used to joke with the prisoners about doing that, but particularly how it would be hopeless for me, right? Is this sort of little white guy wondering, I mean, getting out the...
You can't really cover
Where am I
yourself
going to
up.
go?
Yeah.
So the Steve McQueen thing with the motorbike...
That would have been good.
Just wasn't going to happen.
Would have
alas.
added another chapter to your book. Sorry,
Indeed.
we digress.
Sure.
We got you in a horrible space, and here we are laughing
Yes.
about it. So you've gone in there into this new prison.
Yep. So, and escorted by these guards, they're sort of clanking along with their keys and, again, sort of truncheons and all that. And I'm trying to hold on to my belongings, but I'm handcuffed and, it's just awful. And being, escorted into this area, a sort of yard where there was then, my cell would be. And I'm looking around, seeing other prisoners, trying to work out where they're going to put me and all that. But then a moment of incredible deliverance, Gary, which actually then summarised really the experience ahead. This young guy, a Burmese guy, comes up to me and said, "Sean, you're safe now, you're with us."
Yeah.
And he was a young political prisoner, and he was good to his word, and the rest of them were too. So he sort of breaks the ice. They all then form around me. The guards sort of, I don't even know what they were doing. They sort of disappeared at that moment. And these guys, sort of escorted me to where my cell, what would be my cell. They were tidying it up. They were cleaning it out. There'd been some other prisoners there earlier in the day. They were cleaning it out for me. They looked after me, so that they knew exactly who I was. They were full of questions about where had I been, because they'd heard of my arrest even before they were arrested, funnily enough, So, just full of questions about Aung San Suu Kyi, all sorts of things. But, basically vowed to protect me from that day on. And that's exactly what they did.
Yeah.
All those images and, stories about prisons and so on. My experience of it, and here I might sound a little naive, to be honest, because I'm sure there were parts of the prison that were the worst of jails that one reads about and all that. But the areas that I was in, there was almost like there was such a spirit amongst particularly the young prisoners, of defiance against the military. None of them had any doubt that they were doing the right thing. This was a moment that they were going through, but they were, committed. They were proud, in a sense, and so that sort of that really flowed right across.
Yeah, I suppose that mindset carries a lot of positives with it, doesn't it? In an environment like that, I was struck by the humanity of it, that helping set yourself up, get your little things, giving you advice, and reassuring you. Like, it's showing that there is some humanity even in a place like this. The Muslim fella that cleaned the toilet and that he was one of the bigger fellas and said nothing will happen to you while I'm here and stuff like that.
Absolutely, mate. I mean, part of the motivation for writing the book was to tell his story. Because he sort of disappeared, and we'll come to his fate. But lovely guy. His real name was Khin Maung Shwe, but he had a Muslim name of Jacob, and which he liked, and so we all called him Jacob. He took on all the worst tasks, including this old toilet, which, to be honest, I don't think had been cleaned in the 120 years of the jail. Most horrible thing. But he did all of that. But then later on, he would cook for me. He would do all sorts of things. He was a man of immense moral authority and strength. And a couple of times, some of the prison guards would sort of rough handle me and things like that, and he would confront them. And they were frightened of him because he had a long beard and the full accoutrements, and I think, they were quite scared of him. He wasn't very big, but he was very muscly. He used to work out and all that. And but he just had a presence about him. But of course, for all of that, they had him marked out, because he was dangerous to them. To cut to the end of his story, after I left Insein for a period and then came back, in that interval, he was murdered by the prison guards. There'd been a sort of concoction of a conflict that pulled him in, and then the prison guards turned on him and beat him and kicked him to death. It's a terrible story. So but part of wanting to tell the story was to tell his story and some of the others. I don't want him forgotten.
It's important, isn't it, that something like that? But that just reflects on, and yeah, you strike me as a very positive type of person, looking at the bright side of life on situations. But there was humanity in there, but there was also that brutality, like to kick someone to death.
Yeah, it was just such a mix. Because I don't want to sort of paint the false picture too about, the prison guards were not all brutes or anything. Like a great many of them, they'd have been supporters of democracy. They were probably frightened of the military.
That struck me, that the sympathy you had for them, because they virtually had no other choice.
That's right.
And you could see that in them. You didn't hate them. And I think that probably helped you too. You can't go through world hating everyone.
No. And I think for a lot of them too, that they really had no option. Myanmar's a really poor place. And these young guys, they had no education, no real future in anything. And I would try to bond with them, and most of them were pretty good. Obviously, there's some sadists amongst them.
The ones that enjoy it. They stick out, don't
they?
They
do.
Yeah.
They do. And it was funny, though, just some of the strategies that I tried to bond with them with. Often they would wear Manchester United, Liverpool, Chelsea jerseys and things like that. Yeah, and I sort of drifted away from watching English football for a while. So I'm desperately trying to think of things to comment about them, but manage that. And another thing I did, which tells against me a little bit. I had a picture of my wife because eventually I was able to get books sent, and my wife sent me a picture. And my wife is born in Vietnam.
Yeah.
She looks about 20 years younger than she really is. She looks spectacular.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit biased, of course, and I showed them the picture, and I could just see the respect for me just rising dramatically.
All of us, that's funny.
So it was a way of making connection.
Here's a person that's batting above his weight. Yeah,
exactly.
That's great.
Yep.
Describe the living conditions.
Yeah, just awful. So about the same size as the box, but the cells were being built in 1890, something like that. Yeah. So really run down, old rusty iron bars, concrete floors. They leaked, so there was often water lying on the floor, filthy. There was sort of my cell had some blood stains on the wall. Some of the more fun things was that other prisoners had carved little stories and poetry and things like that. Some of it in Burmese that I couldn't read. I could read a little bit of Burmese, but not a lot, to be honest. So I missed a lot. And then the way that you mark out time by scratching little notches. Yeah. In groups of 5, there was often
Tell me you started to do that.
No, see...
you should have.
But again, Gary, this goes to show that how law-abiding I was. I didn't even think that I could damage public property, right? Yeah. So even in there, I didn't, I can't graffiti.
I don't want to get into trouble. No, you're right, I did put the graffiti on there. That's another 10 years for you.
Exactly. But then one of the funniest aspects too, in the cell in Yangon, in Insein, that I was in for such a long time, somebody had somehow carved a beautiful little portrait of Spider-Man. Yeah. There was a Spider-Man head, which is, I have no idea why. But it sort of beamed back at me and sort of gave me a little bit of hope as well.
You describe it we'll talk about the food, and one thing that, because it was open to the elements, and the mosquitoes. And I don't know, maybe I'm pathetic, but there's nothing more annoying when you've got the buzz buzzing around in your ear. But you would have been just at their mercy.
Totally, mate. And Myanmar's one of those malaria countries, so it's just, the mosquitoes were awful. But, there were worse creatures, alas. Spiders everywhere coming in. The worst of all, though, big scorpions. And I'd never seen a scorpion, and evil-looking things with their curved back.
I've seen them over in Vietnam.
Just awful. And everyone said, I don't know if this is true, everyone said that they like to get in the toilet. Yeah. And I should add, by the way, that the toilet wasn't the sort of toilets we're used to in Australia. They're these awful squat toilets, and but allegedly the scorpions would get there, and it was just not good thinking about. But then there were the rats, like enormous rats would come in and out. But in some ways, the worst, in a practical sense, were the ants, because the ants would come in, and if you had any food, because after a period, I was able to get food sent to me, and the ants would detect that, and they'd be just all over it, and so you'd have to wrap everything in multiple layers because the ants would just eat through anything that food was contained in. So, and then they would crawl over you at night, and you would wake up like with ants crawling on you, and it was just horrible. And I used to love ants, and
You've gone off it.
Totally gone off them.
Not a fan of the ants anymore.
No.
What about the food and your description of the food? That just
Food was awful, without, no euphemism about it. It used to arrive in 3 buckets, just big plastic buckets. One would be a bucket of very badly cooked rice that had often little bits of stone, or actually I think it was little bits of iron from the pot that they were probably boiled
breaking
in.
Off.
So, breaking off. So really hard bits, and I broke my front teeth twice on those. Then there was like another bucket that had a sort of bean soup, and that was probably the only nutritional value came from that, I think, but very watery. Then there was another bucket that was meant to have meat of some form, like beef or pork or fish. But by the time it got to us, the prisoners, all the best bits had been stripped off and sold in the black market, which was quite active in the prison. So really all that was left was sort of like a bone and gristle and oil at the bottom. And often the fish was almost like one of those Warner Brothers cartoons. Yeah. It was all like, the skeleton of a fish. That was it. That was it. Would be left.
What part do you want?
Exactly. So I very often just went without. I'm not a vegetarian, but I really stopped eating meat in that place.
I can imagine. Now, when you're in there, life got a little bit better in that you got some communications, or you started to understand that people hadn't forgotten about you?
Totally, mate. Yeah, so communication with the other prisoners, of course, but after a time, the embassy could get in contact with me, and every 2 weeks we could have a phone call. So the regime used COVID as an excuse not to allow any physical meetings with the embassy. Yeah. So the whole time, the nearly 2 years I was there, I never physically met anyone from the embassy or anything, but we could do phone calls, and they would put my wife on. Yep. So roughly every 2 weeks, I'm hearing from my wife and able to hear news and things like that.
How did that feel the first time you got to actually speak to your wife?
A real mix of things, relief and joy, but really sad as well. Yeah. She started crying. I sort of teared up as well. I think the ambassador had tears. We were all a bit like that. It was sort of very fraught. It was wonderful, but and then after that first time, it was just great. Yeah. But the first time was, it was just that sort of realisation, gosh, how did this come to be, and what an awful situation.
Surreal situation, isn't it? And you had a child. How old was the child at the time?
Yeah, so Phuong was about 19 then. Yep. So she's 21 now.
Did you get to 22. Speak to her as well?
Got to speak to Phuong. And she was incredible, actually. She rose to the occasion wonderfully. She was great, and great at supporting her mum, and the campaign that they raised with my sister Lisa was just incredible.
It was a big deal over here. I remember it. Remember it in the media and that. So you did get a lot of mentions there. People know you're an avid reader, and you managed to sort out your smuggling route to get books into the prison. How did that feel to you for someone that enjoys reading?
It just changed everything, Gary, everything. So books have always been critical to my life, and now they save my life, basically. So at last I could take my mind off stuff. And I have an ability, which in the real world, outside the prison, is probably not something good, of when I'm in a book, I'm totally oblivious to anything going on around me. Yeah. I might be getting called to do something, and I'm just ignoring people because
in another world.
I'm in the zone in the book, and so that became incredibly useful. So so the books were absolute lifeline, and so I was getting near weekly parcels at one point, many of those had books.
And just to make the point here, I'm just laughing because you turned up carrying a book, and the situation was walking down from the railway station. You walked past a community book stand where the members of the community are just leaving books there, and you found one that you've been looking for. How lucky is that?
Absolutely, mate. But yeah, it sort of suggests something, right?
Yeah.
I was sort of naked without a book,
Yeah,
and yeah, there it was.
Lo and behold, we will provide here in Erskineville. There's your books. So the charges. Had you been formally charged? And I talk about the legal system, and I say that half-hearted because it doesn't appear to be much of a balance, checks and balances there. But were you formally charged at any point?
Yeah, I was, but it took a long time.
Yeah.
So it would have been a year or so in before I'm formally charged. So held on a series of remand charges.
Yeah.
Gary, you'd know more about it than me. So every 2 weeks I used to have to go to a remand hearing.
A remand hearing and see what the progress is going.
Yep. And actually some of the worst aspects of the whole experience happened in those remand hearings because we had to be transported from the jail to a makeshift court, and we were all crowded together, 50 to 100 prisoners in a van, that was meant to hold about 20, and it was horrific conditions. And some of the worst things were actually on those remand hearings and the journey to and from. But after about a year, formally charged with breaching the Official Secrets Act.
Yep.
And with that, an equal charge of breaching the Immigration Act. Because I'd breached the Official Secrets Act, I'd sort of then broken the terms of the visa.
Backup charge.
Yeah, backup charge, indeed.
And what did that carry in their legal system, punishment?
Well, so it could have had a maximum of 14 years on the Official Secrets Act, or 5 years on the immigration charge. But the 14 years was only if it involved national security.
Right.
3 years if it was just civil stuff. So my lawyers, so we'd sort of appointed a local team, said to me, well, look, there's no military stuff here and they're not charging you with that. So effectively I had 3 years and then potentially 5 on the immigration.
That's something to look forward to.
Totally, eh? And the weirdest thing about it was that one of the strongest arguments, in fact, one would think this would be the clincher, the lawyers said, look, Sean's not a citizen of Myanmar. He's not formally gazetted employee of the Myanmar state. He has no obligation under Myanmar's Official Secrets Act. He hasn't sworn to protect the secrets.
That's a valid point.
Yeah, it doesn't apply. And so their main argument was, look, he should be all this should be dismissed because the law doesn't even apply to him.
Yeah.
And the weirdest thing, to fast forward right to the end, the judge even acknowledged that in the final sentencing, he said that yes, the law doesn't apply, but we have to think of the spirit of the law.
That's. I wish we could go with it. Survive. What are you relying on?
It is the vibe.
It's a vibe.
It's exactly the vibe.
Yeah. Off the castle. Yeah.
It almost led me to laugh when I heard him say that. Yeah. Almost.
Yeah. How do you win in that situation? There was, just in regards to that, I pulled a quote out of the book when we're talking about the legal system over there. Former Australian ambassador to Myanmar, Nicholas Kopel, didn't think you had a chance. He was quoted, "For Sean Turnell and for other political detainees, the chances of a fair trial are close to zero," he said. "The big fish is Aung San Suu Kyi, and they will be wanting that to show."
Totally, mate. Yeah, so all along, I knew I was a tool to get at her.
Yeah.
So, which was also an extra level of distress for me, because as you can imagine, she was my friend, remains my friend. Yeah. It was just awful. Eh? It was awful that they're using me to target her, but also other friends. So they would identify documents that I had access to or worked on or whatever, but then use that as the basis of getting them. Yeah. Just awful. Yeah.
Sean, during this whole process, did you ever just get, like, we're seeing you now, you appear that you've processed it and what you've been through and you've survived, and full credit to you. But did you ever get to the point where you're just angry and going, what the fuck? Like, you wanted to just scream?
Totally. And did.
Yeah.
And did. And so, as you said, Gary, you can see me now, I'm very mild-mannered, little guy, etc., polite, all the rest of it. But a few times, probably 3 or 4 times, completely lost it. Irrational, screaming at the top of my voice, shaking the bars, which was something totally forbidden to shake the bars. But just did it, completely lost it. And even thinking, I don't care if they shoot me, whatever. I'm just just had enough, and shouting very loudly the dictator's name, Min Aung Hlaing, and doubting his parentage, his proclivities, all the rest of it.
Brave.
Yeah,
brave or stupid.
Yeah, brave or stupid. And coming up with profanities that I've never spoken in my life.
Yeah.
So the full range.
Okay. And at what point, can you identify what point? Was it just in the ongoing frustration, or was something that tipped you into that anger?
The first time, absolutely, I was triggered by, I was up in a different prison up in Naypyidaw at this point. It was monsoon and it was a blackout. So the military taken over, completely stuffed up the economy, but including the electricity grid.
Yeah.
So we'd lose the power all the time. But always at night when, so anyway, the lights went off, rain is pouring down, the cell is leaking, filling up with water. And this is about midnight. I would have liked to have slept, of course, but I can't. I'm having to hold all my belongings in my hand to keep it out of the water, and I'm just standing up, miserable as it's possible to be, mosquitoes buzzing around me, the rain pouring down. It's just awful. And I just completely lost it. I just thought, I can't survive this. I just can't go on. And I almost just wanted to bring it on, wanted to bring on a struggle, a confrontation.
Just change the situation.
Yep.
You can't take this
No,
anymore.
exactly.
What brought you out of that sort of state of mind?
Oh, I think just the realisation that, okay, I'm just damaging myself. There's nothing good is going to come of it. I've got to get through it for my wife, to come home, for everyone. Just calm down. It's I guess just thinking the sensible thing to do. My brain eventually just kicked in. I think part of it was just getting it out, just getting your emotions out, and then just sort of sobering up and just thinking, okay, all right, you've had your moment.
Wake up to yourself.
Yeah, wake up and
Did you see any other prisoners sort of get broken by what they were going through?
Not one. Not one. Gary, it's the most extraordinary thing. So I was mostly with political prisoners, and also the Burmese people. Just about all the Burmese people I know, very strong Buddhists, great ability to meditate and things like that. So very, very strong mentally. So they were always calm. Having said that, though, Burmese people can often just snap once that calm disappears.
Okay. Enough of this calmness.
But in the prison, just immensely strong, which again is just one of the many reasons why I just admire them so much.
There was you also, because you came across other prisoners, it wasn't all political prisoners, you were exposed to other prisoners and some people in there for drug offences and that, and I think you made the comment they reminded you of your students. Not that your students are drug dealers, but they were just young people that made a mistake.
Absolutely, mate. There was a bunch, particularly that stands out, of young Taiwanese guys. Would have been maximum 22, 23, something like that. But, I don't know the details of their case or whatever, but there doesn't seem to be any doubt that, that they were trafficking. But they were really come across as innocent young guys. And when I say innocent, not of the charge, but of the world. Just unworldly young guys, just wanting to play football and all the rest of it. And they were incredibly nice, actually. And just really vulnerable and all that. And so incredibly surprised for me to be, locked up alongside drugs traffickers. If in the abstract, it sounds terrible. Yeah. But I just felt like I was amongst my students at Macquarie.
Did it change your perspective on the criminals and the people that fit society's norms? Like seeing people in there like that, did it open your eyes up to the other world and perhaps a little bit of sympathy?
Absolutely does, mate. And even now, I see a news story and I know somebody's guilty of something. But my heart sort of goes out to them a bit because, again, obviously not the worst sort of crimes,
there's some that
but
cross.
But others, mate, just facing that prison thing. It has changed my perspective on that.
It's interesting, and even just sitting here talking to people that have gone down the wrong path, and you find out where their backgrounds come from and the life that they were brought into. Well, it was almost inevitable they were going to go down that path, and you can see that there's certain moments in their life where they've just taken the wrong step and they're paying for it. The other political prisoners, were there any other foreign political prisoners with you?
There were for brief periods, but for the longest part, I was completely on my own. There was an American journalist, Danny Fenster, and him and I managed to smuggle copies of New Yorker magazine to each other.
See, I knew you were bad.
Yeah.
You mightn't have done graffiti, but you were smuggling magazines. Yeah.
There was Danny. There was another Japanese photographer who was there, who was released on the same day I was. But and there was an Australian right at the beginning, an Australian journalist, Ross Dunkley, a very fascinating character, who reached out to me actually when I was first arrested. But he was released only about a few months after I'd been there. But but for the most part, and for a long time I was the only foreign prisoner.
Yeah. So with the court matter, you got moved from Insein prison into the capital. You went to a detention centre in the capital.
That's right, mate. Yeah. So I was transferred up to the Naypyidaw detention centre, which sounds softer, but it was actually worse. Even like much more modern building, but just awful. It was in a sort of like jungle clearing sort of area, and the heat up in Naypyidaw is just terrible. It's like it's on the dry central plain of Myanmar, and the heat is tremendous. The only time you don't get any relief from the heat, but during the monsoon it gets wet. Yeah. But that's the only difference. It's either wet and hot or dry and hot. Horrible place.
And now that you've become an expert on prisons and your prison tour, how was that prison compared to Insein prison?
Yeah, funnily enough, much worse. So I think the Brits, in building Insein prison, it was being built to a design of the great English social reformer Jeremy Bentham. So there was a certain humanistic aspect to its design. Sounds a bit bizarre, but there were aspects to it that were meant to make life easier for prisoners. Naypyidaw had none of that. It was just like It reminds me actually of the prison in Bridge on the River Kwai and some of those others. Yeah. It felt like a concentration camp, but just a horrible place. And even just like the quality of the building was just awful. Like, the walls didn't fit together properly, and just horrible place.
How were you received with inmates there? Because you had to make new friends in the new prison.
Incredibly well, actually, because they concentrated all of the economic reformers, including ministers and all that, together. Okay. So most of us knew each other, and it was almost like a big reunion, big school reunion.
Yeah, you could have had some lively debates about the economics and other interests.
We did, actually, and we had conversations about economics, but then these were all incredibly clever guys, and we even called our afternoon discussions the barbed wire university, and we would sit around a drainage ditch just discussing anything from politics, philosophy, religion, economics, anything.
Yeah, that must have brought a little bit of happiness to the situation you're in.
Yeah, it did, and those guys again were incredibly strong. Sometimes we'd get so much into an economics argument, we'd almost forget where we were. We'd actually sort of start planning of policies to do, and then sort of realisation, oh wait a minute, we're in a prison. Yeah. We're not in government, we're in jail.
Now, with when the sentence handed down, would you describe that you went through a trial of such, or was it always a foregone conclusion?
Always a foregone conclusion, and completely ridiculous.
Yeah, it was just a show trial?
Totally a show trial. I had people turn up saying that I'd made confessions to them who I'd never even seen before, false documents that had been very clearly and expertly fake documents with top secret stamped on them, all this sort of stuff. I had a document presented to me that I had written, but told, this was top secret and I shouldn't have had it and shouldn't have read it. And
trying to point out that I wrote it?
Trying to point that out, and it carried no freight whatsoever. The whole process just absurd. But we knew exactly where it was going. As soon as you're charged in Myanmar, you will be convicted. There's no question about that. And in fact, your lawyers are not even allowed to argue back vigorously, because if they do, they'll be imprisoned as well. So, it's just total farce.
So were you given a time period when you were convicted? Like,
Sure was, hey? Yeah, so I was given the full 3 years for
Yep.
the civilian sort of breach of the Official Secrets Act, and then 4 years for the immigration breach. Effectively 4 years.
to serve concurrently, or
Yeah, so
Yeah.
concurrently. So what I faced then, in other words, was about another 2.5 years. So, because by the end of this process, of course, I'm nearly 2 years in. So, yeah, it would have been about another 2 years to go.
how did you cope with that emotionally?
I was okay at first because there'd been an expectation that as soon as I was convicted, I might have been deported. So at the back of my mind was a thought that, okay, this has to happen. The
They've had
process
their
has
fun.
to come to this. They had their fun and they'll boot me out. So I was okay at that point. There was a moment of real false elation when an immigration officer came up to me and I thought, okay, this is the moment they're going to deport me. But bizarrely, he was there to ask me for my passport. And I remember, and I said to him, "You're kidding? Well, why do you think I've got my passport? I've been in prison for nearly 2 years." One of those just bizarre moments. And then the worst moment, I think, came after that because we were then transferred from this Naypyidaw prison into another one called Yamathan, further deeper into the heartland of the country, but way away from any port, any airport or anything like that. And so we're in this truck being driven to this place, and I just thought, okay, this is it. I'm here for another few years, and I don't know if I'm going to survive. So I'd say that was the absolute low point. Was on that
Because it
transfer.
must have crossed your mind living in an environment like that. What if I get sick? Yeah, like it's there's so many things that could you mightn't survive.
That was my biggest fear all the way through, Gary. I thought that the regime was never going to beat me to death, but I thought you can just die here.
You get sick, no treatment.
Yep.
And
I got COVID 5 times. I'm 57, 58.
Yeah.
People I meet drop dead all the time, unfortunately. And here I am in incredibly high stress environment. There's no medical care at all. And I thought, okay, I could just die here very easily. Or, I could be arranged to have an accident was at the back of my mind as well. So, it was... And again, this is why at that moment I really just felt as low as could be because I'm going further and further away from the embassy, further away from any witnesses to anything. Just really awful.
did the people on the outside, the people helping you, your wife, your daughter, and everyone else, did they keep a positive spin on it the whole time?
They did, and they masked their own anxiety, of course. Always keeping my spirits up. My wife is just incredibly strong. She kept her spirits up all the time for me. Since coming back, of course, I found out all the things that were going on here, all the things that she's trying to deal with, etc. All the pessimistic prognostications around. But to me, they were always very upbeat.
And you had the government pushing for you. You're happy with the response? The foreign affairs ministers and all that were lobbying as strongly as they could?
For the most part. I think they got off to a slow start.
Right.
To be fair completely, though, there wouldn't have been anything much to do anyway because this regime in Myanmar doesn't listen to anyone.
I thought it was interesting they had our head of military confer with them because that carried more weight because speaking to their military.
Yep. Actually, the Australian Defence Forces, all the way through, fantastic. The military attaché, this guy called Tony Egan, just wonderful guy. And the Vice Admiral, the Deputy Head of the Australian Defence Force, reached out. I'm so thankful to them, actually, because I think those interventions helped in my treatment. The expectation was this might even get me released. But that didn't happen. But, just so grateful for
I
them.
would imagine in a situation like that, you think at least people know I'm here. So you mentioned the accident or getting sick. They know there would be ramifications or it'd look upon badly if it happened when you've got people in positions of power at least making references or making endeavours to get you out.
Yep, totally, mate. And there was certain respect actually even came through the prison guards with the about the Australian military because one of the more bizarre moments, I remember a prison guard came up to me to tell me that Australia had signed the AUKUS deal, and he said, "Sean, Australia's getting nuclear submarines. They might nuke us. And I remember thinking, well, that's unlikely, but I'm pretty pleased to hear it.
They're going to come and get you out.
Yeah.
That's why we signed it, Sean.
Exactly.
You're not keeping our Sean. We're getting you back. The amnesty or the pardon when you were released. How did you find out about it? Did you have any idea it was coming? And what was the process?
The opposite of an idea that it was coming, actually.
Yep.
Mate. So, 16 November 2022.
Yep.
It's our wedding anniversary. I've got one of my calls with my wife, and we consoled each other to the fact that I was still going to be there for many more months, and that there was no hope of getting home for Christmas or anything like that. So this is the 16th of November. The very next day, I'm doing my pacing around the cell, and the prison guard comes up to me and says, "Good news, Sean, you're going home." And it was a little-known Buddhist holiday.
Yeah.
So the Myanmar regime often does that. They'll time prisoner releases with a holiday. And, so he said, time to go. And I just dumbfounded. I didn't know what to do. I was sort of frozen in situ. I didn't know what to do. I started packing, unpacking, and eventually I remembered that my wife said, "Sean, don't bring anything home." So just walked out. But totally out of the blue. And as I say, it sort of just come at a time that we were reconciled for many more months in the prison.
Okay, and so it was that simple once you walked out of the prison?
Pretty much, right? We were then taken to a big auditorium where we had to sit through the prisons.
When you say we, all the other people that got the...
That's right. So there were 3 other foreigners released with me.
Yeah.
Very prominently, a former British ambassador, Vicky Bowman.
Yeah.
And so we're sort of marched along and brought together and then taken to this auditorium to get a lecture from the prisons minister about, obeying the law and things like that.
Did you listen to him?
No, I certainly didn't. Actually, by then my Burmese had been totally degraded, actually, because everyone in the prison wanted to speak English to me, funnily enough.
Yeah.
So you would think it'd be an environment, right, where your language skills could go
picking it up.
Exactly the opposite. See, because the one thing the other prisoners could do where they could be productive was learn English. So they didn't want me speaking Burmese. Anyway, so my language skills are totally gone. So thankfully, I couldn't understand almost a word of what the minister was saying. And then taken off to the airport, where totally surreal because we arrive at Yangon International Airport, diplomats all around, glasses of champagne, even regime officials there, trying to make light conversation with me. And
were they proud of themselves or?
It's just so bizarre. Gary, I remember one of the ministers coming up to me and saying, "Oh, it's a bit unfortunate, Sean, but look, thank you for the things you did for the country." I think, what? I mean, you locked me up for 2 years.
Oh.
Just totally surreal. And then, put on planes and all that. And but I mean, one of the other sort of, again, surreal moments, this flight back to Australia, and it's business class, so that, just the gap between treatment. Arrive in, but the only flight we could get was to take me to Melbourne. And I live in Sydney, so we then had to transfer back on the Prime Minister's plane from Melbourne back to Sydney. But we're still within 24 hours earlier. So here I am on the Prime Minister's private jet. So quick. Within the space of 24 hours, I'd gone from this dank, dark dungeon cell onto the Prime Minister's private jet.
Wow.
Going back, and I'm just thinking, wow, life is very, very strange.
Were you pinching yourself thinking you're going to wake up? Was this just a dream at that stage? That would have been surreal.
And I think some of the ways of disassociating yourself with what you're experiencing, like in the bad times, to survive. So you've got the hangover of that too. So it's just a really weird psychological dynamic. Yeah. And funnily enough, stressful as well. Sometimes extreme happiness can be stressful. Yeah. And even just little things. I remember feeling anxious, for instance, when they said, my wife so she was flown down from Sydney to Melbourne to greet me, and as I'm approaching where she's going to be, I'm thinking, gosh, what do I say? It's going to be really awkward and all that. But actually it wasn't, thankfully. It was just completely natural just to hug each other and all that. But all sorts of things like that, because I guess it's the same for everyone, right? Which is, what do you say? Like, what?
Hi, what have you been up to?
No, exactly.
It's bizarre, isn't it?
Totally
I think
bizarre.
we also get accustomed to whatever our environment is. So you
Right.
get taken out of that environment, and all of a sudden there's
Right.
too much choices.
Yes.
Like people become institutionalised. You know, I've got no control, therefore I don't have to plan anything because I'll be told what to do. And they're here, Sean. Here's the keys. You go do whatever you want to do.
I think that's absolutely right, Gary. Absolutely right. And also some other things like I'd spent the whole time trying to survive by reading books and the same book over and over again, and I'd finish them all and all that. Do you know it took about 9 months before I even finished a book after getting out. I just
Really?
couldn't finish a book. My mind just constantly, I'd be reading a book and then putting the TV on and
Overstimulated.
picking up another book. Yeah,
Yeah.
too much choice. I mean, it's wonderful, but yeah, I think my mind, exactly as you've said, my mind became attuned to a different way of living and surviving, and it just didn't match.
What about health after your release from that? Deterioration in your health or setbacks from that? No diseases or?
No, so no diseases. So DFAT, the Department of Foreign Affairs, gave me a big medical checkup and passed that okay, which was important, of course, because these prisons spread diseases and all that. The biggest thing is actually my teeth.
Right.
So I'm still in the process of getting my teeth fixed. It's a long, long period, and of course in dental areas, mate, I'm a complete utter coward. So part of the delay.
All right, tough guy. We've found the weakness. I'm with you. Sit down in that dentist chair and hear that drill go.
Yep.
No.
Yep. So the dental stuff is the worst by far. And then, I mentioned, I think, right at the beginning about just some sleeping issues and things like that. But, but other than that, and the physical thing's mostly okay, but just, I'm 59-year-old now, so I've got all the aches and pains and all that
The
that we
usual
get.
things.
The usual
But
things.
the psychologically.
Yeah, pretty good. Sometimes you get moments. I don't want to sort of dramatise it by saying trigger, but you'll get a memory prompted by something, some weird moment, a smell or something like that, which will take you back there. Every so often you get things like that, and that's quite common. Just sort of weird experience here and there. But for the most part, very, very positive, eh?
Yeah.
I live in Sydney. We live not too far from Sydney Harbour, and we go for a walk around that every morning, cafes and all that. So, and life in Sydney is just wonderful.
Makes you appreciate it.
Sure
Speaking
does.
of triggering and taking you back there, they did even have an attempt to take you back there, didn't they? Wasn't there?
So,
Talk us through this. Just, let it go, guys.
This
let
is
it
the
go.
incredible postscript to it. So I got back to Australia, made a number of comments in the media, but nothing. I think I was pretty mild in what I said, and I appeared on TV a couple of times, things like that. But this caused incredible umbrage in Myanmar, and the dictator himself, Min Aung Hlaing, was really offended.
How could Sean betray us?
Exactly. So I think he'd expected immense gratitude to the great leader for allowing me to be free and all that, and he was really annoyed and withdrew the amnesty, reimposed the sentence, which at first I completely laughed off. I thought, well, come on. So what? Good on you.
Come and get me. But if they issue a red notice, or is
that's
it?
right. So then, only later was I to discover that no, this might have implications. When travelling overseas, you've got to be much more careful. I can't go to countries that are aligned with Myanmar in any way. Thankfully, there's not many of those. But I certainly can't go to Russia. I've got to avoid China, places like that. So. And even Thailand's, I mean, it doesn't support the regime, but it's close. It's next door, and you've got to fear perhaps groups coming.
So have they taken out, like, a red notice? I suppose the easy way to say it is an international arrest warrant that, you're wanted in this country. If you go to another country with a treaty, they could, Sean, you're here.
Yep.
Come with us.
That's exactly the fear, mate. So it means now that I have to be much more deliberate in my travel.
Yep.
I have to, consult with Department of Foreign Affairs and all that.
Yeah.
And, so sort of a spontaneous trip to Asia, for instance, completely out.
Yep.
I can easily travel to the US or the UK, places like that. But, I've just got to be really careful. And but also, I've got to be careful about which direction I go, because I can't really fly over mainland Southeast Asia, right? on the off chance the plane might be
has
forced down
yeah.
into Yangon. So, so I've got to think about, all that sort of stuff.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, that's not a nice postscript, is it? Like,
No.
it's not finalised. And I would imagine, because you love the country.
Yep.
And I would imagine that saddens you, that I can't envisage that you'll be back there.
Totally, Gary,
Yeah.
and that's the worst of it, mate. Like, and I'm sure we've all experienced this in life. Places that are so familiar to you,
Yeah.
and yet I have the knowledge now that I will never see them again.
Yeah.
Because I can't imagine. I'm a little bit optimistic that this regime in Myanmar is in its last days,
Yeah.
to be honest. But even then, I can't imagine Myanmar being in a situation that would be safe enough for me to go back.
Guarantee that you'll be safe if you go over there.
Yep. So I really have to, unless there's dramatic change. I can't imagine that there are not significant figures there who'll want to come after me. So I'll never go back.
That's sad.
Yeah, it
isn't
is sad. Yeah.
Writing the book and the book, The Unlikely Prisoner, how did you come up with the name?
Well, I think because it just kept, and I think even in our conversation, right, it sort of leaps out that this is an incredibly unlikely story.
When did you start writing the book?
Well, I actually started writing it in the prison. So what I would do, again, part of my strategy to stay mentally fit was that I started thinking about this book. And not only thinking about it in terms of broad themes and things to cover, I literally wrote it word for word in my head. I wasn't allowed a pen or paper or anything like that, of course, so I just had to construct it in my head. And then day after day, I would build the story up, but I would go back and once I had the story complete, I would then go back and even change sentences and even commas and things like that.
This is all in your mind?
All in my mind. So, this was this period where, without any distractions like phones or anything like that, my memory just became incredible. And I was able to, just use the writing of the book as a way to stay, as I say, mentally fit. But it meant then when I got back to Australia and finally got a pen in my hand, it was almost like I was just transcribing rather than needing to write it as such. Yeah. So probably about a third of the book is exactly in that sort of just rapidly transcribing what I literally recorded in my head.
Had in your mind.
Yep.
That's fascinating.
Yep.
Prison does amazing things.
It does. Yeah, there are some upsides, dare I say.
Oh, here we go. Always positive.
I should say Australians everywhere have been so nice to us.
Yeah.
The emotional response to people has been incredible. People coming up to us, tearing up as they're coming up. And I think part of it is the nature of that, that this is a story. I think people can sort of identify it because it's sort of like, gosh, if that guy can be put into a prison, then we're all more vulnerable than we think. So I think it was to tap into that thought.
I think what you've got to appreciate, and you're a humble type of guy, the fact that you've come through this with such a positive outlook is quite amazing. Because when I heard about your story, I'm thinking I'm going to pick this book up and there's going to be this angered, tortured soul. And I found completely the opposite. What's your secret there?
Yeah, I don't think any secret particularly, Gary. I think more, just of what's the alternative, and what's good for me, and it's good for me to get through and to focus on the future and all that, and even to think of the funny things, just the incongruities, the strangeness of it all, and writing about it. I think I used to reject the idea that it was therapeutic. People would say that to me. But I think probably it was. I probably underplayed actually the need to get it down, get it out. I think that probably does help in the process. In retrospect, I was probably a bit too defensive in dismissing that. So I think
when you have to put it into words, it makes you actually address the issue instead of just flicking over the issue. So
I think that's right.
That might play a part.
And I think just that of bearing witness, I think, is part of it as well. And particularly bearing witness for my Myanmar colleagues and getting their story down is a strong part of it as well. But,
do you feel for the people left back there?
Oh, totally. And in fact, this is the worst aspect because there are so many people who I don't mention in the book, to protect them. But they're lovely friends of mine who I don't even dare, because sometimes I'm still on Facebook with them and all that, I don't even dare hit like on the basis that could be used against them. Because one of the things with these, political prisoners there were so many people who were in prison for Facebook posts and literally hitting like was enough to get somebody in the prison. So, yeah, so I thought, God, there's no way I can ever, I can't endanger a good friend who might have just put up a post.
Yeah.
Maybe they got married or, a birthday or whatever, and I can't send them anything. And I worry terribly that they'll think I've forgotten them. And, there's Sean, he's off, he's written a book, he's doing podcasts and all that. And here we are rotting over here.
And, you've forgotten.
Yeah, awful feeling.
Because there was, you being a foreigner in that circumstances, as confronting as that was, you're probably in a better position. But I think when you went back to Insein prison, there was executions there, and there was a death row around in their orange overalls.
Totally, mate. So, and in fact, the last final thing to intimidate me for the last 2 months, when I was taken back to Insein, I was put on death row with the other prisoners who, in fact, the immediate way that I knew they were death row was that we were all forced to wear these blue outfits, but the prisoners on death row had to wear these bright orange outfits. And as I'm being escorted into this ward, I could see the prisoners had washed their clothes and hung them out to dry, and they were all orange. And at first I didn't think about it. Then about 30 seconds after seeing it, I thought, oh no, wait a minute, this is where I am. But those prisoners were wonderful. Prisoners with less than nothing, they would give me their bread ration. That they would, in an incredible act of compassion, they would think, oh, here's this poor old foreign guy. He probably can't eat rice. There's always this assumption about, he can't eat rice, but we got some bread. We'll give him our bread. And what an act! It's breathtaking.
Those things like that restore your faith in humanity.
Totally.
You would have lost a lot of faith in what happened to you, but you see those little acts from, and as you said, from people who've got nothing and still prepared to share their food.
Yep, and also I think it's a great point you bring up, because the balance sheet of humanity to me is more on the positive side.
Yeah.
And this has nothing to do with me, just a rational calculation of how many acts of incredible decency did I meet versus the other side, and the balance is completely one way. So overwhelmingly, I saw humanity on display. Yeah,
that's fantastic. Well, Sean, thank you so much for coming in today. I'm glad you picked up a book on the way. Are you sure that was a community book stand? I'm going to fight. You must have done something wrong. Surely no parking tickets. Everyone's done something wrong that comes on I Catch Killers, but I haven't been able to trap you. But your outlook on life, I've just really enjoyed the chat. I really enjoyed the book. It's out now. People can buy it, and so the people that you're talking about there are not forgotten, and what's happened over there. I think it's important stuff. And good luck for you with the future. Just stay out of trouble this time, will you?
I'll try, Gary. I'll try.
Thanks very much, Sean.
Thanks, Gary.
Cheers. Well, I've just spent 2 hours with a person that was locked up in one of the toughest prisons in Asia, and he hadn't done anything wrong for 650 days, and I can't keep the smile off my face. I've just met one of the world's nicest people, economist Sean Turnell, who has a fascinating story, how he was imprisoned in Myanmar, how he survived that, and has still got a positive outlook on life. I think he's one of the really impressive people we've met on I Catch Killers.